Hello and welcome to Agios Nikolaos, a quiet corner in the Kassandra Peninsula. My name is Daniela and in my videos I tell you about the history, mythology or art of the places I visit in Europe. The Bay of Agios Nikolaos is a peaceful oasis, away from the very busy seaside towns and beach resorts. The bay is on the east side of the Kassandra Peninsula, and it is either the first or the last naturally sheltered harbour in the peninsula. The harbour is mainly used by local fishermen. And on a strip of land that protrudes into the bay, there is a small church dedicated to Agios Nikolaos. Saint Nicholas is the patron saint of travellers and sailors. The small church is a landmark for boats leaving or returning to the small harbour, and it is also a beacon of light for the fishermen and their families. The chapel to Agios Nikolaos was constructed at the beginning of the century on the foundations of an older church. It is likely that there had been a church or chapel in this area since the 1st century AD, and before that there was a sanctuary to Apollo. And these blocks of whitish stone, sprinkled with some vigorous vegetation, are the remains of a sanctuary dedicated to Apollo Kanastraios. There isn't much information on why a sanctuary to Apollo was built here, but ancient and modern historians have given us a few clues. So let's turn into detectives and hope we end up more like Sherlock Holmes and less Inspector Clouseau. The sanctuary was in the Ionian style, and the first colonizers of the peninsula were from the island of Euboea. The people of Euboea were Ionians. Why Apollo? The Ionians worshipped Apollo. It was their most important god. Apollo was the god of the sun, the god of light and enlightenment. This included poetry, music, knowledge, and the law and civic institutions. Apollo is also the protector of travelers, and famously, he was the god of prophecy. These attributes come together in Apollo as the god of colonization. Colonization, in this context, means a small group of men leaves the home city-state. They find a suitable piece of land and start building a new city-state. The enterprise begins with a visit to the oracle of Apollo. The oracle, hopefully, comes back positive, and with Apollo's blessings, the men set sail. The colonists had a blueprint on how to set up a new city-state based on their hometown. Having settled there in practice, things were a bit more flexible. Sometimes the Ionians settlers met with local resistance, sometimes they fought back, sometimes they moved on. But often their presence was accepted. The colonies were not exact copies of the original city-state. The plan was adapted to the local circumstances, geography, resources, and local communities. The new colonies at the beginning are very vulnerable. To survive, they need to establish good relationships with their neighbors. This means incorporating some of the local laws and religious practices into their own laws and religion. So, Apollo, for example, becomes also the god of healing in the Halkidiki Peninsula. And let's not forget that colonizers were all men. Very rarely women and children joined these enterprises. Marrying a local girl was common, and this contributed to the cultural exchange. Most historians agree that this area was colonized by the Ionians from Euboea at the time of the Trojan War, about 12th–13th century BC, but there is no information on when the sanctuary to Apollo was actually built. But from records found at the Temple of Zeus Ammon and in other sources, it seems that by the 4th century BC there was a sacred place dedicated to Apollo here. The next question is, why here? The bay was an important safe harbour in a strategic position. The bay overlooked important shipping routes that started in the east, went past the three legs of the Halkidiki Peninsula to the island of Euboea, and from there all the way to Athens. Why was it called Apollo Kanastraios? Greek gods often acquired a sort of geographical surname. This bay was called Kanastraios, therefore Apollo became Apollo Kanastraios. It seems that the bay was called Kanastraios because it is shaped a bit like a shallow basket. Kanastraios comes from the ancient Greek word for basket, kanastron. These baskets were made by weaving kanna. The word kanna means reeds. As they left the safety of the harbour, ships would go past the sanctuary. Sailors would offer a prayer to Apollo asking for protection while at sea, and sailors entering the safety of the bay would thank the god for the safe arrival. The sanctuary was a geographical landmark used to identify the harbour, but it was also a spiritual landmark, and in a way the small church of Saint Nicholas performs the same functions. It was lunchtime and we stopped at Sούvlas Ghi BBQ taverna in Kriopigi, and I mentioned this Souvlas or barbecue and taverna because we had a really good meal there. They do slow-cooked barbecue on charcoal and we had some delicious pork belly. It was juicy, tender and very tasty. The fried potatoes sprinkled with paprika were very nice too, and the complimentary pudding was piping hot Greek mini donuts or loukoumades. The hubby loved them. Thank you for watching. In my videos I tell you about the history, mythology or art of the places I visit in Europe. If you like this approach to travel, please subscribe. Thank you for watching. Have a lovely day. Bye bye.